Jump off that exhausting hamster wheel and into balanced living with Dr. Marissa.
Promise you joy in the mystery.
Dr. Marissa, also known as the Asian Oprah. Her mission, to be a beneficial presence on the planet. Her purpose, to be your personal advocate to live, laugh, love, learn. Her life motto, don't die wondering. Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And welcome. You are tuned into Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on NBC News Radio, KCAA, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and more. And of course on my YouTube channel, which is a free subscribe. That'll also get you an alert every morning at 8 a.m. when the show drops. And I'm so delighted to be here with you because I want you to be happy. I want you to be 88% happy. Why? Because it's your birthright. Why not 100%? Because if you're 100% happy, you're dead. We do not want dead people walking or talking, but I do want you to claim your birthright. And right now, I know it is difficult to be happy. I know it's difficult to find anything to smile or laugh at, but I promise you, you can. And that's what this show is about. And as per usual, I like to start the show with, what day is it? I found this little site that gives me interesting things about each day that I like to start with. And it also gives me an idea of what I want to talk about today. So it is September 22nd, and it is American Business Women's Day. And it's the autumnal, I don't know if I'm saying that right, equinox. It's the first day of autumn. It's car-free day. So if you're driving, pull over, get out, and start walking. Just kidding. Chainmail Day. Wow, chainmails. Remember that? Dear Diary Day. Elephant Appreciation Day. So I'm going to use that to remember my beloved, one-of-a-kind, wonderful friend who's in heaven now, who has been on my show 4 or 5 times, Dawn Wells. You remember her as Marianne from Gilligan's Island. And she loved elephants. And she actually was honored for her work in the elephant sanctuary. So Emancipation Day, it's a state holiday in Ohio. Interesting. And so because it is American Businesswomen's Day, my spotlight interview later on after the break will be with Geneen Roth. And I've actually had her on the show 3 times. The first 2 times to talk about what she's known for, which is compulsive eating. She was Oprah's diet coach and has a number of brilliant best-selling books, including Women, Food, and God, and my favorite, which is When You Eat at the Refrigerator, Pull Out a Chair. But I'm actually spotlighting her 3rd interview, where she shared with me that she had been taken advantage of and was one of the victims of Bernie Madoff, who made off with 10 million of her dollars. And I really wanted her to talk about the process. So especially now, when a lot of us have suffered loss, myself included, financially because of the pandemic, I thought that would be a good spotlight interview to learn from her how to recover. But before that interview, there's a couple of things I wanted to cover. As per usual, I like to bring you my on-location interviews with stories that touch my heart. And today's no exception. When I covered a rally and protest that was held by the family of David Ordaz Jr., who was shot and killed by a sheriff's deputy on March 14th after family members called for help during a crisis in which the man was holding a knife and appeared suicidal. Ordaz Jr.'s family and supporters were there, including families who lost their sons to police officers during a mental health crisis, protesting the killing and promoting mental health awareness and services. So I was there and got a chance to get a soundbite with David's sister, whose words about healing and what she's done for her own mental health awareness, I thought would be a wonderful way to spotlight mental health, your own, and answer that question, how do I feel better right now? So enjoy. So here it is.
Live. You know me as the Asian Oprah. This is a somber and powerful and important event this morning. The Aztec dancers are here to start the march and rally justice for David Ordaz Jr., who was killed by the police. It's one of those cases of mental illness that ended up in tragedy. I'm going to have his sister on the show, but I wanted to share this very important event, the rally, as well as the recognition that we really don't need police going out when it is a mental health occurrence. This is Dr. Marissa reporting live. Remember, it's all about balance. Peace in, peace out, world. Peace through.
I wanted time to mourn my brother. And I feel that now I'm in a better state. Dignity and Power Now has been helping me with therapy, talk therapy. I'm getting it once a week. And I'm just so in love with them because my insurance would only provide mental health for me once a month. And it wasn't working. It wasn't helping. And as soon as I got in with Dignity and Power Now, I have been getting therapy with them once a week. And my therapist is so wonderful. He's been helping me so much. And that's the reason why I could be here today and why I could talk. I was avoiding everybody. I was avoiding people. I was in my own depression state at that time. And this is why I could do it now. And why mental health? Because in our culture is something that we don't talk about. It's something that is like a taboo. You know what? Just leave it off. That's what we're told within our culture. And we need to bring awareness to that that's not what it is. We need help with that. And you know, now I think about how I am not as bad as David was. David dealt with this for more than 10 years. I just started. So I could see how I worked so much to get the therapy that I have now. And I could see how someone who has been struggling with this for 10 years, how hard this must be. And I don't want that for our community. I don't want that for my people, for my raza. I want better for them. So that's why I'm here now, giving them these words like 5150. So if they're ever caught in the situation that I was, that they know what words to use and not be ignorant like I was in that moment. I want them to know that we have acupuncture for free, that we have talk therapy, we have yoga that helps us. What are those things? Running helps us, right, with our mental health. So those are the things that I want to bring awareness to. And my family agrees with it as well. So I'm glad that I have them behind me.
And I'm going to have her on my show, so keep tuned in for that. But I just really loved the way she highlighted how she healed through a tragedy like that and continues to, and wanted to share it with you. When we come back, I do have a question of the day, which is a little bit different since we covered how do we feel better right now, from a site that I'm a member of a group of on Facebook. And And there was an interesting question there about relationships that I wanted to take a stab at. So when we return, I'll answer that question of the day on Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, the NBC News radio station that leaves no listener behind.
Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And we're back. You're tuned into Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, NBC News radio station, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere on all the popular platforms, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Audible, Spotify, and more. And so here's the question of the day, which for a change is not, how do I feel better today? You got a chance to hear great advice from David's sister earlier in the show. So I am actually part of this Facebook group, and I found this question there, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a stab at it because it's called Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It, right? That's the name of the show. So here's the question. See if you can relate or know someone who's in this situation. I have a boyfriend who keeps breaking up with me. When we're apart, I am at peace, but then he'll call and we'll talk at hours on end. And then he goes quiet and rarely calls or texts unless I do. I feel I'm struggling to keep this relationship going. Will stopping communication from my end be the answer? Well, and this is one of those classic relationship complaints that I hear all the time from my relationship clients who are single, who will say, the ones that I don't like will come after me, and the ones that I like do the yo-yo dance. And what this person was referring to, I call the yo-yo dance. They want you when you're cool without them, but as soon as you're cool without them, they want to come back in. And then when you say, okay, I'm in, and then either they get scared or whatever the reason, because you can't figure it out, then it drives you crazy because it's just this back and forth. And all you can think about is, should I stay? Should I go? As she was saying, should I cut it off, or should I, continue to be open to the relationship? So here is my answer to this particular question of the day. I believe that in relationships, and those of you who are watching my YouTube can see this. Those of you who are just listening will have to come to my YouTube after. And I taught this to my daughters very early on in life, in any relationship. So picture two hands about a foot apart. And if one person makes the effort to go to 50% halfway, then you make the effort to go 50% the halfway. Now, the problem is that, especially if you're a woman and the man, the yo-yo man, as in this example, does a 20% move, we jump and fill in what's missing from their 50% with my additional 30. So I go 50 plus 30 to meet them, not in the middle, but at their 20%. And women, more so than men, I would say this is not a generalization, but one of those group differences, especially if you have this thing called codependency, where the only thing that matters is how they feel, and you come second. That's my definition of codependency. And many of us who have had childhood trauma develop codependency very early, where our happiness is dependent on your happiness. And so I'm going to do everything I can to make you happy, even if it means jumping through hoops, or in this case, jumping to 80% and allowing them to only do 20%. So if you're cool with that, then there's nothing to be in turmoil about. But hopefully you love yourself and you're listening to me long enough to know that it's always self before others, not in a selfish, mean-spirited way, but you got to take care of yourself. You got to learn how to love yourself. You got to learn how to soothe yourself, because if you're always running around with the antenna up looking for somebody to do that for you, you're going to be disappointed and you're going to be miserable, and you're certainly not going to be happy 88% of the time. And again, totally understandable if you are in that boat, because we are influenced by movies like Tom Cruise's You Complete Me, right? Or the fairy tales. The prince rides in and rescues us. So both family and society has taught us, and we don't develop the muscle strong enough to choose differently. So we just go with their flow, so that you think there's something wrong with you if you're, one, not with someone, and number two, if they don't stay and give 50%. If someone doesn't stay and give you 50%, in my book, that just means it's not a match. They're not bad. They're not horrible. They're not an SOB. They're just not a match. You're not horrible. You're lovable, loving, and loved. It's not about you. It's just not a match. So I default to, what do I want? Do I want a guy that does that? Do I want somebody in my life using up my time, which is a valuable resource? It's the most valuable resource I have, because you don't get it back. Do I want to choose someone in my life who treats me like that? Now, you can make it personal. If I were lovable enough, or if I were attractive enough, or I were buff enough, or I was sexy or hot enough, he wouldn't do that. That's bullshit-talky. He's doing that because she's just doing that. Now you have a choice. What do you want to do as a result of that? Do you really want to choose that? That's all up to you, boo. So and obviously I'm advocating for you that you choose someone who doesn't do that, only because there's a lot of people who won't do that. But as long as you keep doing the yo-yo dance, and as long as you keep focusing on that person, then guess what? You choose to be part of that yo-yo dance. Does that make sense? All right. So that's your answer to the question of the day. If you know anybody who is doing the yo-yo dance and you want to forward this to them for advice, for an answer to the question of the day, please do. If you want some relationship coaching, please come to my website, drmarissa.life, or you can book a little time with me just directly, drmarissa1.youcanbook.me, and we'll have a little discussion to see if I can't give you a little bit of help. All right? And today's Asian Oprah giveaway is my children's book, Mommy, What Are Feelings? Every feeling has a taste, touch, sight, and sound. And the illustrations were done by my daughters, Chloe May and Sarah Way, when they were 5 and 7. So the first 8 people to go to Dr. Marissa Life. And so the first 8 people to go to drmarissa.life and put in the subject line on the pop-up Asian Oprah giveaway, Mommy, will get a download to that book. If you would like to be a guest and or be sponsored and or promote your book or product or service, or announce something that's going on in your community or your organization, please do contact me. It's easy, drmarissa.life, or you can even schedule a soundbite of time on drmarissa1.youcanbook.me, and happy to discuss very affordable rates starting at $88 for you to be here on my show about hope and happiness. And when we come back for the rest of the show, I'm delighted to bring you my spotlight interview with a 3-time guest who's so well known for her compulsive eating solutions. Geneen Roth, best-selling author, diet coach to Oprah, my honorable moniker. Those of you who wonder why I'm called Asian Oprah, it's not because I named myself. I was actually introduced to Oprah as the Asian Oprah, dubbed by my big brother, Michael Bernard Beckwith. So, aside, but she was many times on Oprah, and she has great books. And my favorite one is When You Eat at the Refrigerator, Pull Up a Chair. So when we come back, my spotlight interview with Geneen Roth, not on compulsive eating though, on how you deal with loss of finances. I thought that would be a great spotlight interview right now because a lot of people have lost a lot of finances because of the pandemic. So she lost $10 million to Bernie Madoff, who made off with her money. So don't go away. Come back for the spotlight interview with Geneen Roth. Here on Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show on NBC News Radio, KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And we're back. You're tuned in to Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, CNBC, and NBC News Radio, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere. KCAAradio.com to over 100 nations, as well as iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, iTunes, Audible, and more. And without further ado, the spotlight interview for today with Geneen Roth on how do you recover from losing $10 million lost to Bernie Madoff. Enjoy. Thank you, Geneen, for keeping your promise to come back. Welcome to the studio again, Geneen Roth.
Thank you.
I am so blessed to have you back. And I'm just amazed. Of course, you already have said it was a learning experience, but I would like you to take me back to that time because I want to know you're human, and you can't have been as gracious about it when it happened. How did it happen?
Now, how did which part happen? How did we find out that we lost all of our money, or how did we end up investing with such a crook to begin with?
Okay, let's do that one. Or let's do both. Let's do both. I mean, you're successful. You worked really hard to get where you are and were at the time. This happened, 2 years ago? Not that long ago, right?
Oh, no. Well, no, the Madoff was arrested 5 years and a half years ago. And I think I, like many women, and I think like many people, but women in particular, because after this happened, I did interview a lot of women, think that the world of finance is quite complicated. Mm-hmm. And so we either, actually, I'll talk in the first person here because I don't want to talk for all women. I felt as if I was doing the work that I was doing in the world, which I adored and still do adore.
That you're very good at.
Started from nothing, with nothing, as a maid and a dishwasher, and then started doing what I loved. And I, for a long time, I wasn't even quite sure about, I was so clueless about money and investing, and because that always seemed to be the world of men and my dad and the big, powerful men who knew how to do it. And so I didn't really know very much. And when I met my husband in 1986, I assumed that he knew more than I did. And yet our history of investments was not very good. I seemed to be fine at doing what I loved and making the money I make doing that, but made poor investment choices. Always seemed to lose money in any investment I made. And it was after my husband and I, our financial advisor, had embezzled quite a lot of our money in 2000, that a good friend of ours whose father had known Madoff invited us into his Madoff Fund, where you could invest anywhere from $2,000 to anything you wanted to invest. He did that as a gracious thing for all of his friends, because he and his family had been invested in for 30 years and had done well that entire time. And we felt relieved and grateful, because when something has been working for 30 years, you assume that it's going to keep working.
Right. Right. And
So
I didn't even know about the
we-
prior embezzling. So you even had someone before this who stole from you. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what I mean. I say in Lost and Found, my book that I wrote about this, if we decide to invest with anybody, people should run the other way. So that's probably a surefire way that you're going to lose money.
No.
But so that's how we ended up with Madoff. We didn't know who he was. We did, and my husband did actually the same thing as I did. We loved our friend and trusted him. And we'd known him for quite a few years, and we knew that he had something, that he was a lawyer and quite a successful lawyer, and we knew his family was successful, and that's how it happened.
Wow. Right. So okay. So then you found out, a call came in.
Then we got a phone call. Then we started putting more and more money. We actually used our Madoff account as a savings account in a way.
Wow.
Because my husband loves what he does. I love what I do. And
can I ask what your husband
Richard
does? I don't know. I don't think I know.
His name is Matt Weinstein, and he works in the field of laughter and play.
Oh, wonderful.
So he gives. Yes, he's wonderful and very funny. Thank God.
And I've read, and I've read a number of things where your love for him comes out very, very strong. So yes. So you can tell him that you love him on the air.
We just thought Richard knew a lot, and instead of us doing all the research, seemed like Richard had done it, been working for 30 years, and this was a good thing. And so that's what we did. And then in December of 2008, which is when this whole thing got exposed, Matt went off on a lifelong dream trip to Antarctica for a couple of weeks, and I was by myself and got a phone call from a good friend of mine saying that Madoff was in handcuffs and that the whole thing had been a fraud and a Ponzi scheme, and all of our money and actually all of our friends' money, because we knew about maybe 20 or 25 other people who had done the same thing we did, because Richard extended this offer to all of our friends. Everybody had lost their money. And Matt and I, so that meant that we were left with basically nothing. 30 years of life savings having gone down the tube.
Wow.
And it was shocking and terrifying, and also shameful, really, because everybody knows that putting all your money in one place is not a good idea. And so there were so many conflicting and piled up feelings and emotions, terror and shame, and
wow. I'm so sorry that happened. I'm sorry that happened. I can't even imagine. It's not pleasant, that's for sure. But
no.
Then the recovery.
I called.
Yes.
I called as I say in Lost and Found, I'm not really. Well, I don't see myself as somebody who makes lemonade out of lemons.
Oh, really?
Although that seems to be what I do.
Right.
Because I have such good support and love in my life, I called a good friend and a spiritual guide of mine, because I couldn't move from where I had answered the phone. And she said to me, after saying, "Oh, this is horrible and you'll need to grieve," and she was appropriately shocked, and then said to me, "Nothing of any value has been lost." And I said to her, "This is not the time to be spiritual," because it seemed, of course, something of value had been lost. We had just lost 30 years of our money, and I didn't know where we were going to live or how we were going to live, or if we... everything was in shambles. And over the next couple of days and weeks, I realized I spent the first couple of nights not being able to sleep at all. And because I just...
it's sickening.
I was terrified.
Yeah, it's sickening. I mean, I can't even imagine that feeling. It's worse than... pretty much there's, what is that, the number 2 stressor, death of a loved one, the first one, and then financial loss, I think, is number 2.
Yes, it's very well, because it connects in with your survival and how am I going to live, and all the things that money is connected with, and I realized that if I was going to be able to live through the night and the next days, and for all I knew the rest of my life, I was going to have to start focusing on what I hadn't lost, not what I had lost, what I had enough of, not what I didn't have enough of, and that was a vigilant practice for me.
Yeah.
And I did somewhat out of survival because my mind, my ranting mind, was so intense and so terrified that if I allowed myself to get lost in my thoughts, then I was lost.
Right.
And I couldn't function. And so if I brought myself back to the fact that I had a roof over my head at that moment, the fact that I had enough to eat at that moment, the fact that I was fine at that moment, the fact that, the sky was still here and I could walk and see and breathe and drink and, I could eat and I was, whatever it was at that moment that I still had, I had to keep bringing myself back to that. And of course, that's the whole essence of any spiritual practice.
Right.
So it gets...
It's a discipline.
There's something about crisis that, and whether it's the crisis of losing everything as I did, or getting a terminal diagnosis, or almost dying, or of...
losing a marriage... That's a traumatic marriage.
Loss.
Losing a child. Yeah. And your formula is such wisdom. So if anyone out there is listening who loss of a job that you depended on, or loss of anything, that the beginning is allowing the grief, what you said your friend allowed you to work through, and then the discipline of focusing on what you have and who you are that is outside of that. That's what I heard. Is that about accurate?
Yes, okay. That's true. I did cry a lot, and I got a lot of support. A friend came over and spent the night with me for the first 3 or 4 days, and I talked to a couple of people who I knew could sort of help me bring myself back when I went flying off the cliff of terror and shame. But that discipline of bringing my mind back and noticing what happened. I'll just take a step back for a second, because unless you do that, any decisions you make from the place of absolute terror are not going to be good decisions. And so really the only way to proceed is to somehow bring yourself into this very moment and to see what's happening in this moment. And from there, you can make decisions that actually are wise and objectively sound decisions, treatment plans, the kind of support you need, what to do next. I wrote for myself, after doing that practice for a couple of weeks, which, as I said, had been the essence of a meditation practice I've been doing for 30 years but hadn't been very successful at. Suddenly, with this loss, I was able to do that because it was about surviving moment to moment, just in terms of not eating myself up with shame and terror.
Right. And you said eating yourself, and I was going to ask you about that. You know, you're the old, when we talked last time on the air, and you talked about times when you felt suicidal around food and eating and weight. Did any of that come back?
No, that was that period. That was in 1978 that I was talking about being suicidal, and no compulsive eating came back. There was no desire to binge. No.
So your work,
none of that came back because the tools that I had this time, the choices that I could see I had, I saw that I had a choice. Choice A was suffer by getting lost in my thoughts, in my mind, and the shame and the terror. Choice B was bring myself back to this moment and breathe and notice that there were still birds, a sky over my head, that my dog still wagged her tail, that I still had a body, that I was still above ground, that I still had my mind, that there were, and the more I focused on that, the happier I became. Or certainly the less fearful I became, but I would say genuinely happy. That's the whole practice of gratitude and appreciation that Brother David Roth talks about, which he says is the only practice any of us ever need. But it's something that we forget about all the time, to appreciate and take in the good we already have. And it works. That's the amazing thing.
Absolutely.
It really does work.
Absolutely. I start with 8 gratitudes every day as part of the 21-day fast from complaining. Wayne Dyer says 5, but I'm a recovering overachiever, so I do 8. And 8 is actually a homonym in Chinese for good fortune. So I absolutely concur. I didn't go through anything like that, but there's a similar vein when I went through the divorce, where all the money that I had made in my business was being thrown around in the lawyer's office, how much I was going to have to pay, and anywhere from $10,000 to $2 million, and up and down, and the business that I had built was gone. And I felt, when I stayed in my head, and same shame, blame, terror. And I can remember going to the gym, with that same, I don't know how I'm going to pay, and I don't know how I'm going to live. And I bumped into, not by accident, someone who said, you will always have a roof over your head, and you will always have food in your stomach, and you will always have people who love you.
Right.
And I'll never forget that day at the gym. Her name's Erica, and you know, that discipline, and then choosing from that day forward to not focus and go down what I call the labyrinth of shiitake. Because as soon as I start doing the negative thinking and the worst case scenario, and then I end up in the effinator, there's no way out, and then I feel like crap.
Yeah.
And the only thing that works is gratitude. So yeah, absolutely, I'm there with you.
Yeah.
And then you wrote a beautiful book.
Right. Well, see, what happened is, and this is sort of goes to what we're just talking about, I started realizing that I had a lot to say about this because there was a lot of press there was a lot of press, of course, about all of this every day. The newspapers were filled with Madoff this and Madoff that, and
I know, bad jokes too.
I realized that I had a different perspective, and I wanted to write about that and share that with people about how they could find their balance again. And because I had found mine within a couple of weeks, and because of that, a friend suggested that I write about it, and the piece was originally called "What Bernie Madoff Couldn't Steal from Me," and so I wrote it, and it appeared on Salon, I guess the first week of January, so about a month after the debacle, and it became their number one widely read piece on that, and then from there I realized I could write a book about it. And so that's what I mean. If I had lived in the shame and the terror, then I never would have written that piece, and I never would have written that book, and I never would have gotten actually interested in any of this. And so a lot of good came out of that, but I would say the most good, and I feel like writing the book was fabulous, and I learned a lot about the relationship with money and how similar it is to the relationship with food. That was the most shocking thing for me. Yeah. But I would say the most good that came out of this was understanding that no situation that I'm ever in is unworkable. That if I can bring myself back to what is here, to just bringing myself back over and over and over again, while allowing the wash of feelings to come through, then no disaster has the power to tear me apart. And that's what I'd always been afraid of, that something would happen and I'd have a nervous breakdown, or I would not be able to survive emotionally, because I think I was afraid of my own mind and the very scary places that my mind could take me to. And even though I had lived through and worked through the trauma and the abuse that had led, in my opinion, to my compulsive eating for so many years, and I had such a nasty childhood, the way so many people have had, I still didn't quite trust that I could be there for myself in the way that would help me live through a disaster like this. And having done that and having seen that I could, that's the best thing that came out of that.
Wow. I can totally hear that. It's like nothing can hurt you. There's nothing can happen to you that is going to take you down.
Right. I will go down and I wake up and, a lot of times in bad moods, and I get identified or triggered or reactive about a particular thing, and I think it's the end of the world, and then I catch myself. Then I realize I have a choice. So I think this is a back and forth process, but eventually you understand, you catch yourself sooner and sooner and sooner and sooner from that brink of disaster that you can go tumbling over. You don't get on the bus, so to speak, of shame and guilt and fear. And, it's it's sort of like, and again, one of my spiritual great guides said to me, it's sort of like you don't get on the bus or you get on the back of the bus and hang on to those pipes that are
smelly and burny and hot
diesel fumes and dragging you and bumping you along on the road. You just say, no, thank you, I'm going to let go. And I'm not going to do this time. I think we think that the more we suffer, maybe the more somebody will come and help us or rescue us somehow. That if we're just feeling miserable and lonely and hysterical enough, then, something will happen, because as a kid, something could have, should have, or else did happen, with somebody coming. But the thing is, we're adults, and so now we've got different choices. And this is the choice, to know that you have a choice.
Yes. That's the most powerful balance tool I know of.
Yeah.
That we have the choice. So it's your choice whether you want to feel sorry for yourself that you had 30 years of money taken and stolen away from you, and that choice leads you to a place where you're crying and laying in bed and bemoaning, which is okay as a normal grief process at the beginning, but 10 years down the line, if we're still in a fetal position, pickling in our victimhood, shame, blame, fear, terror, anxiety, worry, depression, it isn't much of a life.
No, it's not Bernie Madoff who did that to you then. It's your own mind. And then it's understanding that it is your mind, and then getting the support that you need to learn how to do it differently. Most people do it like that. It's
well, I think that's one of the reasons why there's 1 out of 4 are taking anti-something.
Yes, it's very hard to realize that. So I mean, some of it is biochemical and choiceless, and some of it really is a choice. For me, the most powerful thing is that moment where I see I've got the choice, where, okay, I've got a choice now about where I put my attention. That is in your power.
Right.
The rest of the stuff, what happens, and even the thoughts you think, I don't think they're actually about what you choose to think. I would much rather not have most of the thoughts I think. Definitely not have those thoughts. But if I put what the choice is do I just, saturate and marinate in those thoughts and just keep on following them, or do I put my attention somewhere else?
Right.
That's what my choice is.
Right. I love that saying, my mind is like a dangerous neighborhood. You don't want to go in there alone.
Right.
Or the other one is at night, this is one I use in my teaching, is, we go through this little meditation practice where we unzip our heads and put it on the table, like with our jewelry, so that the mind is allowed to go to sleep.
Such an amazing, true story. And what a great attitude and advice for us all as we come out of a pandemic where I would say everybody lost something, and many, many, many of us lost money. So really some great pointers in there. And if you'd like to hear that interview in its entirety, please go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Marissa. Just Google it, and you can enjoy that along with 535 of my other shows. Tune in tomorrow for another scintillating episode of Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, NBC, CNBC News Radio Channel, the station that leaves no listener behind. And this is Dr. Marissa reporting live, reminding you that it's all about balance. Peace in, peace out. World peace through inner peace. Have the best day ever.